listening to Sasquatch Syndicate.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard.
And all the ape believers don't want any of the paranormal believers to say anything because they're all whacked and screwed up, and we don't want them. And all the paranormal believers don't want to go to the ape believers saying, well, you're all closed-minded. You're not open to the fact that it does this and it does that.
And I look over my left shoulder, and this creature is running through the woods, and it's bulldozing the brush down. And I knew, man, this thing is going to get me.
Welcome to Sasquatch Syndicate. I'm your host, Chuck, out in Seattle, Washington, along with Paul in Portland, Oregon. Thanks to everyone for listening and those following us at SasquatchSyndicate.com and on our social media outlets. For those participating in the Sasquatch Syndicate monthly t-shirt giveaway, this month's winner was Matt Berry from Somerville, South Carolina. So Matt, congratulations, thanks for listening to the show, and please check your Facebook for winner notification. Happy July, everyone, and happy Independence Day to our friends up in Canada on July 1st. And to all those here in the U.S., we wish you a safe 4th of July celebration as well. All right, so on to this month's show. Tonight on Sasquatch Syndicate, we are joined by Jen and Jenna from the all-female Sasquatch research team, better known as She-Squatchers. So ladies, thank you both for joining the show tonight. And maybe we can start with you, Jenna, and really how you became interested in Sasquatch and how you got into the phenomenon.
My name is Jenna. I'm one of the She-Squatchers, and I guess I just wanted to let you know that I did have what appeared to be a very normal Christian upbringing on a farm north of Minnesota. I love animals and nature, and it was something that I just grew up with. And I've always been interested in the different cryptids and just paranormal everything. And when Jen and I have been friends for quite a long time, and when Jen explained about her team and why she came up with it, what it was about, and what they were doing, I was so excited. All I could think of is, wow, I need to be on this team. And I was sold, hook, line, and sinker. I was ready to go. I was raring to go. And I'm part of the group because I've always been interested in finding answers to questions that no one can answer. And I'm a skeptic by nature, and that doesn't mean I don't believe there's a possibility that, supernatural and paranormal things don't exist. I know that there are spirits. I know that they can communicate with us and physically move us out of danger because that has happened to me, but I've never actually experienced a cryptid up close and personal, and that's why I'm on this team, and I'm excited to have that happen.
So Jen is the founder of She-Squatchers. What was it about the phenomenon that really jumped out at you and made you really want to start a research organization there in Minnesota?
I'm a psychic medium and animal communicator remote viewer, and I have been doing paranormal work for years, and I'm actually a missing person psychic, and then I found quite a few missing people. That's not my forte. I don't enjoy doing that, but I'm good at it. To be honest, I never really thought about Bigfoot before. It never really occurred to me to think about Bigfoot. No one had pressured me to give an answer whether or not Bigfoot was real, so I hadn't spent any time considering it. Most of the time, people were asking me about ghosts or what happened historically in this location. What can I sense? Can I talk to their dog? Things like that. And I'm a very skeptical but open-minded person, meaning I'm open to anything, but I want to experience it for myself to know that it's real. And so I decided, let's go do this. And on some of the episodes, one of the episodes that I've seen of Finding Bigfoot, they were talking about tree knocks and how they knock on a piece of wood on a tree, and then in the distance, something knocks back, and they believe that to be Bigfoot responding to in a form of communication. But they said they didn't know what Bigfoot might be trying to communicate to them. They might be saying, come on over, and they never show up. Or they might be saying, get out of here, and they never leave because they really don't know what it means. And I thought, this might be good because I'm so intuitive, and I might be able to pick up on what they're trying to communicate in other ways. So I thought this would be fun. I grew up in the woods in northern Minnesota. I'm part Native American, and walking through the woods alone as a child was my pastime. I was brought up never to be afraid in the woods. Being alone in the woods is like being home with your family. And so I thought, hey, we'll go out there. We'll see if there's anything out there. And if the worst case scenario is we have some good hikes, we find something great.
Yeah, so for the listeners and maybe Jen and Jenna, you might want to check it out. But out on the Sasquatch Syndicate website, there is a section on remote viewing. So maybe take a peek and look at some of the results.
That is part of the website that I haven't seen. I have been playing around on your website quite a bit, and I didn't actually see that part. So I'm going to have to go check that out.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to have you maybe try remote viewing of Sasquatch and kind of see what you get. But, geolocation, there's been a lot of techniques on kind of where these creatures were located and triangulated, but it'd be kind of cool to have you kind of calibrate that.
Actually, that's what we do. But the kind of remote viewing that I do, I call geographic remote viewing, and it's a little bit different than controlled remote viewing, which is what the Army code will be doing. I do know how to do controlled remote viewing. It's just, to me, I find it's very frustrating to me to have to interact with a moderator who is directing my focus, because typically they aren't following my train of thought anyway. So I just find it annoying. But I actually, when I do remote viewing, I'm actually looking at satellite imagery and I scan it. And as I'm asking questions, I'm asking, where is Bigfoot? Can you show me Bigfoot? Where is there Bigfoot evidence that we could collect here? And the image that I see changes on the screen. Doesn't mean that the image actually changes for someone else to see, but what I see changes in reaction to my question. And that's how I can lock down a location. And we've been doing that, and it's been working. It's been awesome. We were able to park 75 feet away from an area that was lighting up as Bigfoot evidence. And I could see from the satellite imagery that there was a trail leading near to that, but I wasn't sure if it was a drivable trail or what kind of trail it was until we got there. And put on our Facebook page, you could find some videos of us driving through that, and it's an overgrown old logging trail that really my car got scratched up driving down because you can see the trees brushing across my car. I had to stop and move them out of the road sometimes. But we were able to drive it, and we were able to park. And I said it's about 100 feet or about 100 feet that way into the woods, and it was right there. It was 75 feet into the woods. We found a big structure. It wasn't just one of these weird stick structures that you see a lot of people finding. This was a den-like structure with a fence that was weaved around it in a very large area with towers that were 2, 3, 4 stories tall. There were 3 towers total that we saw. The one that we saw first, we noticed it right away, and I was focusing on it a lot. We didn't necessarily notice the other ones while we were there because we were so focused on the den-like structure. It was humongous and so articulately built. It was crazy. But it was a really cool find.
So Jenna, as a new researcher kind of joining Jen's team and kind of, starting your journey, what were your expectations going in, and what have you really learned along the way?
Okay, well, first of all, when I was young, I had experiences with ghosts in my house, and that's what kind of got me interested into the paranormal, and that interest was growing. And because my parents were winter Texans, I was actually able to go down to Texas. I met a lot of people down there, and I heard of my very first cryptid, which, I didn't realize Bigfoot was a cryptid at that time because I was younger, but I heard of the chupacabra, and they were literally very scared of this chupacabra. So that's kind of what got me into learning about the cryptids. After that, my world kind of changed a bit, and I was addicted to everything paranormal and, anything from aliens to cryptids to ghosts. As I got a little bit older, that kind of drifted away for a while. I was still very interested in it, but I didn't give it the time that I really wanted to dedicate to it. As years went by, though, and getting back together with Jen and hanging out with her again, just talking about everything paranormal with her again and the different things that she works on and the things that I've experienced and everything, it sparked my interest again, and it got me so excited about getting back into nature, getting back into cryptids, getting back into the unknown, searching for something that has basically been never been proven before.
So Jenna, of course, you had a lot of different experiences growing up that kind of compelled you to kind of explore the unknown. But what do you think it is about Sasquatch or Bigfoot that really drives people to go out on the search?
Well, as far as Bigfoot is concerned, I think a lot of times people have an experience in the woods that they cannot explain, and they want to know more, like what was that about? Or maybe they've been exposed to other people talking about Bigfoot and hearing different stories about Bigfoot, and they are sparked with a curiosity. I think a lot of times in life, it can get pretty boring. We go to work, we do our jobs, and we come home, and it can get very boring and monotonous, same thing every day. I think in everyone's heart, deep down, they're seeking an adventure. And this is definitely an adventure. Going out with Bigfoot is definitely an adventure. And even if they're not brave enough to go out and do it themselves, they can live vicariously through those who do.
And how about you, Jenna? What do you think?
I really think that everyone is intuitive, and it just is about how open they are to it. People that are more open to it, we tend to trust ourselves a little bit more. People that are not that open to it, they have all of these experiences that happen to them that cannot be explained, like, picking up that phone call or picking up that phone when someone's calling you. You pick up the phone and there's your mom. Hey, I was just calling you, but the phone didn't ring. Or, something happens where you get a feeling that someone's hurt. And lo and behold, someone's in the hospital. That's the different kind of intuition I'm talking about. And I think that a lot of people experience. And I think that curiosity of why those things happen is one of the things that is why they want to look into it more. They want answers not only about themselves, but they want answers about all of these things that are happening in the world that don't have explanations, and they watch television like Jen was talking about. They're exposed to all of these different stories and experiences, and I think every one of us either has had something happen to us that cannot be explained, or we know someone who has had something happen that, can't be explained. So I think that's where it all comes together. That's where we can all come together and realize that, hey, we're all the same. We are curious human beings. Let's get together, prove something, and make a statement and just get happy, I guess. I don't know if that was a answer, but.
So I know you'd mentioned animal communication and maybe being able to understand, what wood knocks or potentially rock clacks or vocalizations could mean. But what are your thoughts now that you've been doing the research, and what have you uncovered?
As far as tree knocks are concerned, we don't do that. I refuse to hit a tree, and and people can call me a tree hugger all they want, but I just don't think that I need to hit a tree to communicate with Bigfoot. I am not opposed to clacking rocks, although we haven't actually tried that yet. There were members on our team previously that were open to and who did actually do some tree knocking, and we had already been interacting with something out there that was throwing rocks at us, so I'm not necessarily convinced that did anything either way. And I refuse to take part in that at all. But I'm not against clacking some rocks. The whole thing is, for us, is that our motivation has been to see if we can find Bigfoot before we ever get to the woods, and then we just show up, and here we are. And that's been working pretty well for us, to find areas where we're finding evidence, at least. And in that den-like structure that we found, I was pretty confident we were not alone in there, and I think Jenna felt the same way. Jenna is the most fearless person I've ever met in my entire life. and I was feeling like there were dark places inside of one of the towers, at the base of one of the towers, and I couldn't see into it. But I felt like there was something in there, and not to get too close to it and just pretend it's not there. Because there were rocks being thrown while we were in there and right out there. I'm pretty confident we were not alone. And so we weren't clacking anything or trying to communicate any other way. We were just trying to be mindful and check it out and yet not overstay our welcome, I guess.
So if you wouldn't mind, maybe you can share a little bit more about the towers, kind of what that experience was like. Did you feel like you were being watched, and really kind of what led you there?
I'll start by saying that we had somebody describe us these kinds of towers to us before when the elders were telling us about a structure that their grandkids had found. The way it was described to us, that we had tried to find and couldn't, and so we just decided to divert to areas that I had remote viewed and seen something to save our day. But what was described to us was that trees were pulled out of the ground with roots and all, flipped upside down and teepeed together with the roots in the air. And these were tall enough trees that you could clearly walk straight upward underneath that where they are teepeed together. And this was like a marking post, and the directions he was giving to us to the structure that his grandkids found was you walk underneath that where those two trees are teepeed together by the roots in the air. You can walk underneath that and straight into the woods and keep going until you see the Hogan structure. And I said, what is a Hogan structure? What does that look like to you? And he said, it looks like a wigwam, but weaved together out of trees and sticks very articulately, like a wigwam. That's what I felt was the safe thing to do. So I just kind of kept my distance from it and walked around it. And I kind of tried to tell Jenna, look here, but let's just go this way. And and in a way tried to tell her, let's pretend that there's nothing there. But I was feeling cautious, like don't get too close. But at the same time, I felt safe as long as I wasn't just barging in there. And I was trusting my instincts really highly that day. And then Jen, all of a sudden, when we got around the fencing area, which we didn't even really realize was fencing until later because we were so focused on looking at the tower, we weren't even really paying attention to these sticks that we were moving to get in there around it. But when we went back and looked at the video, that stuff was weaved together. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a fence. Why didn't we notice that before? We were so busy looking at the tower that we were not even noticing that. And there were so many other things that we didn't notice while we were there because we were so busy looking at the structure that we weren't noticing the other things that were there too. So, it was so much to see, and we were running out of light, so we were being quick about it. And it's darker in the woods too. When you're inside of something like that, it's darker in there, even though it was still sunlight out. What was it like? I was feeling cautious because I kept seeing things out of the corner of my eye, seeing things moving, seeing things walking, and then I would look, and then I'd see just for a split second, and then it would be gone. Like, it would be hard to focus in on something, but it just kept happening. And I felt like we are not alone, and we are surrounded. That's how I felt. I was feeling cautious, but not afraid. And as soon as I started to feel afraid, I knew that we had overstayed our welcome, and it is time to go right now. And I beelined for the trail, not even going back the way that I came in. I said, Jenna, we need to go now. And she was further away from me because I had backed really far away to get a picture and get some video of the whole thing all in one big picture. And so I was quite away from her at the time because I had her standing next to it. She had a GoPro camera on her head that was blinking a light so that, her 5'5" could be measured standing next to this thing and to see it in all of it at once with Jenna standing there as a measurement. That was awesome. But as soon as I started to feel like, okay, it's not okay anymore. We really need to go right now. And I just beelined for the trail to the left. And that's when I realized that that fencing that we had come through before was also over here. And at this point is when I realized this is a fence, and it's way over here. And this is a huge thing. This is way bigger than I thought. And that scared me.
So you had mentioned teepee or kind of a wigwam. Can you share a little bit about our listeners, kind of the geometric shape of that and really what that looks like if they have never seen one?
A wigwam, for the listeners who don't know what that is, imagine a teepee. I'm sure you've seen that in the movies, a Native American teepee, but that was more the Sioux, Dakota Sioux Indians used teepees. They were more like mobile homes they could pick up and move. A wigwam was a very similar structure, except that they were using a type of willow tree, the red willow tree that's very flexible, and they would bend the sticks to make a round dome structure in which they would put their hides over to make a wigwam, a round structure instead of a teepee. And so what he was describing to me was something more like a wigwam, but made out of trees and sticks that were weaved together, but not like tied together. That was the thing. They weren't tied. Natives would tie things together. If they had built it, it would be tied. These had nothing tied. And so but I mean, I literally grabbed a hold of this thing and shook it and couldn't make it fall down. It was put together so well. So when we couldn't find the structure that the elders had told us about, we decided to go after looking for the things that I had remote viewed. And so I pulled out my phone and found out where we were on the satellite imagery and how to get back to a main road, and then how to navigate to the point where I knew that other area was that we wanted to look closer at. So we got out there, and I told the girls before we got out of the car that to the right was what I saw, about 100 feet into the forest, straight out from the right of the car, was the area that I saw as the aggressive male Bigfoot that I was kind of scared of. And I said, if we get out of the car to the left and go directly straight into the woods without turning, within 100 feet is something that's lighting up. That it was a very large area that lit up as a golden light in color, identifying an entire area. It was quite large, and it lit up in reaction to me asking for Bigfoot evidence we could collect. So I said, it is that way. Within about 100 feet, we'll start seeing something. I don't know what it is. Let's go find it. So Nikki had looked into the forest, and she says, oh, I think I see something back there. So I stopped looking to the right towards the aggressive male and moved to the other side of the trail and just started looking in, and I started to see movement back there. And I knew there was stuff back there. And Jenna was still grabbing her gear, and she's talking to Nikki. And I'm like, come on, Jenna, let's go. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, now. And I start walking into the woods because I see stuff moving there, and I want to get it on camera. And and now I'm walking back there by myself, and I'm like, now, Jenna, now. And I was actually being kind of rude because she wasn't listening to me right away. And I realized I'm walking towards this by myself. I didn't want to do that. So here she comes. She's catching up, and you know, we start to see the tower is the first thing that really became out to me. It was at least 2 or 3 stories tall. It was these trees that were teepeed together at the top, so it was like this gradual ascent, but it wasn't really wide at the base. It wasn't hugely wide at the base like a teepee would be. And there was something in between them that was kind of a weaving of something that was foliage that was weaved between them. So it was almost like there was like levels that you could hang out in this tower. And the very base of it, before the tower started at about 5-6 feet off the ground. Below that was this dark area inside this mush of down tree. It looked like a mush of down tree. And there was so much trees on the ground there that I was having trouble making sense of all of that. It wasn't until later that we discovered on the side of it, when we went around the side of it, and Jenna went into the actual den-like structure, we realized that down below and behind that, it had been dug out. It went down further into the ground, and all those trees that were on the ground on the other side of it were like a roof over that other area that was lower into the ground. We didn't actually explore that area. We didn't explore it. we had to get out of there before that happened.
Right.
There's so much of that area that we wanted to see. But the tower, the first tower that we saw, I was really fascinated with it, and I kept looking at it with my camera, and then I'd look away because I thought I'd see something moving, and I'd look back at it. And what's interesting when we go back and we look at that footage, and I pause it, and I tell people, what is it? Does it look like there's something in there? Yeah, there looks like there's something in there. Okay, and then I press play, and then I pause again. How does it look? Anything in there? Yeah, there looks like there's something in there. Okay. Can you keep track of kind of what that looks like in there? Okay. And we just play, pause. And then I'm like, okay, how about now there's something in there? And all of a sudden there's nothing in there. It's clear. You can see right through the thing. And that's when people usually get really freaked out. They're like, there's nothing in there. Where's the thing that was in there before? Where's the stuff that was in there before? I'm like, I don't know. It's just not there anymore. So then they always want to go back and look to see what was in there before, because obviously it's not there now. So, that kind of thing. It wasn't super clear, but yet you can obviously see that there's something there, and then there wasn't something there inside the tower.
I was just curious too, what time of year it was, and what was the, I think you guys said it was kind of around dusk, but can you kind of just describe kind of the weather and maybe what time of day it was?
It was the beginning of August when we found that. And, again, we were looking at the tower so much so that we weren't actually paying attention to the thing that we would later realize was more of a fence, until we looked at it, at our footage and realized that. But when we got around the fence to like the inside of this fenced area, we were looking at this den-like structure that was just really cool because there was an obvious doorway to get in there. And there was an obvious place for something to lay, more than one thing to lay down. And the ground had been worked up inside of there. And Jenna went inside of it, and she kept saying how soft it was inside there, like softer than a mattress. And there was no sticks. There was no rocks. The ground outside of there were sticks and rocks everywhere. I mean, you'd lay down and definitely get poked by something. But inside this thing, there was nothing like that. Jenna should probably tell about that.
Actually, there was an entryway, which was about 2 feet by 4 feet, I believe. And as we moved the trees away from that little door area. And as I entered the door and went inside, it was actually the first thing that I noticed was it was cleaned out. And it was soft, but it was clean. I mean, really clean. And I looked all around me. The first thing I did was laid right down so I could just view what they'd probably be seeing, whoever would be in this structure. And I looked up, and it was completely, I'm having a hard time explaining this.
Was it kind of a woven canopy, something like, maybe the Army would use to provide camouflage from people above?
There were trees that were kind of stacked and weaved together and creating like the back wall, and then it had like an overhang over that. And it was so thickly placed that rain wasn't going to get in there. I mean, there might be drops of rain that come through there, but it was very filled with foliage above that they were pretty much out of the rain there. Very, very interesting.
You had mentioned that you saw what you believed to be kind of a door or a kind of a swinging gate. It's kind of what was going through my mind, but can you describe that a little bit more?
There were two long sticks, and when I say long sticks, I'm going to say maybe an 8-foot little tree that had no branches left on it. And they were placed as part of the back end of the tower, and they came down, and they were just placed diagonally in front of the doorway. It wasn't a door. It's a doorway to get into this thing. And literally, Jenna picked up both of these things and just scooted them over, and they just easily moved, and then you could put them right back, like blocking the doorway. And earlier she said it was like 2 by 4 feet. I think it was a lot bigger than that. We didn't actually measure this. We didn't have time to measure that. That was one of the things we wanted to do when we went back there, but that didn't happen either. But it was. I'm going to say the doorway is probably about 5 feet tall, but it got smaller as you went in. Like you would go in a little bit and you'd get down on your knees in there. But even then, Jenna was sitting upright on her knees, and there was a lot of space above her head. She's about 5'5", and she was sitting like that talking to me. I was videoing her in there. It was not easily picked up by the camera because although it was light outside, it was dark inside of there. And so that was the trouble. We're trying to video it. I'm like, I really can't see you very well in my camera. It's too dark in there. And so then we had to redo it, trying to use light during the day to try to light up the inside of this thing. And at the same time, I didn't feel like we were all alone in there. So it was kind of frustrating and exciting and overwhelming at the same time because I felt really excited that we found something. I felt really excited that I think that they're here with us and they're allowing us to be here, obviously. And yet I wanted to make sure that we weren't being disrespectful. And we hadn't expected to find such an amazing thing. And so we hadn't talked about, like, what are our procedures going to be if we find something like that. We hadn't even gone over that. So Jenna had touched a few things that I didn't think she should be touching. And so I'm like, kind of leave that alone. And because we hadn't gone over, like, what should our procedure be. So I think we're a lot more prepared this year going in of what we should do in that kind of a circumstance. We hadn't expected to find something so amazing like that right there. So we were really excited to find that. Footage later, that from the footage where I had backed really far away and left Jenna standing by it to be that 5'5" measurement next to it. It was in that footage later that we saw the other 2 towers that we didn't even notice when we were there. And because they were a lot bigger and they went up a lot higher. We didn't even notice them when we were there. So we were just so focused on that structure that we didn't even see that.
It was camouflaged from view in all different directions. Jen actually took pictures from many different areas of the forest or of the woods, and she said she couldn't see me. I could see her. She could not see me at all.
Oh, yeah, that's the thing, too. Like, I was looking at something, like there was an area something had been digging at. You could see something had been digging, looking for grubs or whatever it was doing. Something had been digging. And so I was looking at that, and I turned around, and Jenna was gone. And I just like, oh, Jenna, where are you? I can't see you. And I can hear her. She's like, I'm right here. And I'm like, I can't see you. Where are you? And she had walked around to the other side of it, and I absolutely could not see her at all. But she said she could see me. But the foliage in that thing, I mean, something could have been right there, and we could have just not seen it, you know. And Jenna was wearing bright colors, and I couldn't see her. So, I mean, it's very, very interesting how quickly one can disappear in there. To realize that this den-like structure is more like a village. It felt more like a village at that point. And I'm beelining for the road, just busting through this barrier to get to the trail. Because I'm like, it is time to go. And we did. We got back to the vehicle and off we went. And the sun was going down too. So I just knew it was time to go.
And Jenna, what was your impression, or how did you really feel at the time?
I felt excited that we had found something, not only out of chance, but because Jen had remote viewed it. So not only was I excited to be there and to find this fabulous structure, but we were in the woods and everywhere we looked, it seemed like I would see things out of the corner of my eyes, just like Jen had mentioned. I would see movement, but, you know, you can't say that's Bigfoot because nature is full of animals. And I was so invested in what we were seeing in front of us that I wasn't really paying attention to the big picture. You know, I was just looking at the structure and the pieces. I wasn't looking at it as a whole. As far as how I felt, I was excited. I had adrenaline pumping. My body had a bit of a vibration. I didn't feel necessarily scared. In fact, I didn't feel scared at all. I felt very safe. I really enjoyed myself out there, and I can't wait to get out there again.
Yeah, I kind of find that fascinating. And, you know, oftentimes, and it's happened to us a couple times where Paul and I went out, we observed some things in different areas throughout the weekend. We got home and then we kind of connected the dots and we had to go back. And we were just like, how do we miss that? That certainly was connected to what we observed the first day. And we went back and sure enough, it all kind of came together. I was just curious, you know, did you guys ever return to the site?
We did go back. We were able to go back a couple months later, and the leaves had fallen from the trees and whatnot. And what was interesting is that as we were driving there, you know, I pulled out my phone so we could see the little blue dot moving down the trail so I could find this place again from aerial view. And somebody else was driving the car, so I'm looking at my phone watching us as the blue dot, and I accidentally started to go into my remote view mode. And it wasn't that I was trying to, but all of a sudden I started to see like I do when I remote view a satellite image. And I said, oh, it looks different there. It's different there now. And we're not even there yet. And I'm like, it's different there. And I'm starting to tell them in the car what's going on as we're driving down this trail. And what I'm seeing is different on the satellite image. What I'm seeing remotely that then is different. And I started to see, and I said, I see ladders, like really tall ladders going up into nothing. But I'm seeing a lot less going on there, but there's huge ladders. And I didn't know what that meant. Now, sometimes when I do remote viewing, the symbology of what I'm seeing doesn't make sense to me at the time, and later it does. Or maybe it doesn't. Someday or another we figure it out. What I found was interesting later, though, was that I had listened to a episode of Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis where she was doing a remote viewing experiment with a lady who was doing remote viewing, and she said that she was seeing ladders, chutes and ladders, that they were like metaphysical spirit, that they were able to travel on these like chutes and ladders. And so that was really interesting to hear much later after I was saying there was ladders. So that was an interesting thing to see, because what I saw were ladders going up into nowhere, like hidden places. And so that was very, very interesting. But when we physically got there for the second time, I was convinced this was not the right place. I walked right up to it and I said, this is not the place. This is not it. And I was convinced it was not it. Now, I must have been terribly confused. I continued to try to look for it because I'm like, it should be right here, but this isn't it. And Jenna, I kind of talked about that a little bit. She didn't think it was it either. So we continued to keep looking, and I came around to the other area. I kind of went around it from a different angle and came back up to where it should have been. And again, I found the same place. But this time I looked at it from a different angle, and I'm like, no, this is it. And why didn't I think this wasn't it before? It was the most confusing thing. I felt confused about this whole thing, and I kept wanting to walk deeper and deeper into the woods away from there, and I couldn't figure that out. It was a very weird thing. Now, because I kept thinking that wasn't the place and I kept looking for it, when I finally realized this is it, and I can see clearly that this is the same structure, and I just stood there dumbfounded. Why didn't I think this was it before? Because it's obviously the same thing. Then the sun went down and we're standing there in the dark, and it's really dark. And we hadn't intended to be there in the dark. So we were prepared. We always have nighttime equipment with us as well. So we pulled out our nighttime equipment. And, we have a FLIR camera, the same one that Bobo used on finding Bigfoot. We have monocular night vision cameras and, cameras that can see into the dark. And we also have these really nice big flashlights that have stands that can light up something. So we decided we were going to film the structure in the dark. So we were going to use these big flashlights to light it up so we could get a good video of the structure. Even though it was now dark, we could use the lighting to light it up. The problem is that all of our equipment went dead. And our flashlights went dead. Everything went dead. And we weren't able to do very much of anything. I had 13% charge left on my cell phone, and I had 2 headlamps in my fanny pack that had charge left. And so I handed one of the headlamps to Jenna, and I put the other one on. And all of our equipment, and we have a ton of cameras, and we have lights, and we have they all went dead. We can't explain why they went dead. They were fully charged. So, there was no explanation for that. It was very strange. I can't say for sure that something happened to them, but it seems very odd to me that they all went dead at the same time. So those big flashlights that I have, they require a charge every 6 months. And they had just been charged. So there's no reason why it should have gone dead at all.
We did a blog a couple years back about EMF shielding to protect electronic devices. I'm going to go ahead and send you that article, but I'd like to kind of go back to the remote viewing and really what that experience is like and how do you get in the zone, so to speak, and really what the process is of practicing remote viewing. Can you elaborate on that?
All right. So when it's very simple. If you go to a Google search and you look up a location, a city and state, it'll bring up a map you can click on. And and I go into satellite view right on Google Earth or Google Maps. And that's what I'm looking at when I'm doing remote viewing. It's either Google Earth or Google Maps on my phone or on my computer. I guess I can do both. And sometimes one works better than the other. It just depends. This is something that I've been doing for quite a few years. And I started doing it for paranormal groups that were asked to investigate haunted locations where people were living and having some difficulty with some haunting. And I was asked if I could remote view, and I said, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that I can. So they gave me an address to a location that they were going to check out that they had been asked for help from, but they didn't have any information about what was going on there yet. So I looked at the location. And this was the first time that I did it for them. So this gives an example of how it works and how accurate it can be. So I look at the location, and I start to see a spirit bear looking at itself. And I said, he doesn't want to be there anymore. And so I saw the spirit bear looking at a solid bear, but it was himself. And I could feel his sadness of not wanting to be there. So it's more than just seeing. It's a feeling, and it's experiencing almost a oneness with that, where I was feeling what that bear was feeling. And then I saw the 3 Indians staring at the bear, and I described these Indians. I said they're all painted up. One has Indian headdress with feathers on its head, like a chief would wear. The one next to him has a wolf pelt on its head, and the one next to that has a bison fur with horns on its head. And all the 3 Indians are watching the bear. And I said, then I see a hunter running at me, warning me about something that he should not have done. I couldn't hear what he was yelling, but he was carrying his rifle. He was a hunter, dressed as a hunter, and he was yelling about something he should not have done. And then I said, I saw human remains in the house that were not cremation. The people knew that this human body was in the house, and it was not buried, and it was not cremated. And I asked repeatedly if they killed this person, and I got the no. But I couldn't figure out why somebody would have a dead body in their house, not buried and not part of a cremation. That just floored me and really freaked me out. And then I saw something I didn't quite recognize at first, and I really had to continue looking and asking, what is that? Because I saw these weird-looking spirits roaring through the house, just raging mad. And I'm seeing imagery inside of the house, although I'm looking at a satellite image, if that makes sense. What I'm looking at on my phone or on my screen, computer screen, I'm zooming in, and my view of it is distorting into inside the house, being inside the house.
If I may ask, and I find this topic very fascinating, but are you entering kind of a dream state? Can you explain really what's going on in your mind? And is it kind of like, you look at a 3D puzzle to find the image and you kind of defocus and relax your mind and eyes to enter this kind of realm to remote view?
I would say it's a soft with soft eyes, kind of like if you ever went to Spencer's in the mall and you look at those funky posters that you're supposed to be able to see a different image. If you look at it just so, you can see a different image than what you normally see when you look at it. It's like a soft eyes look. The same way a person would try to look at an aura is with soft eyes, where you're not looking directly at it. Like, it's not a sharp eagle vision. It's more of a soft eyes look. And literally, sometimes my screen will turn into a movie where it's moving. So it's seeing into something. It's a focus point for me to see a little bit of a vision, and it's interacting with my question. So I'll see something and I'll say, "What is that about? Why is there a human body in the house that's dead and they know it's there, not buried?" That freaks me out. But if I go into the rest of that story when they went there, because when I typed everything up and I gave it to them, what I saw there. And the leader of the team was like, "Oh, I don't know, Jen, that doesn't make any sense." I'm like, "Oh, that's what I saw." So they go there and he calls me. He says, "Oh, my goodness." He says, "I walked into the house and the first thing I see is this huge stuffed bear in the corner, like a real bear, a stuffed bear was there." He says, "And that was shocking enough. But then I turn around and there's 3 Indian masks on the wall across from the bear, and they're real masks, like where Native people have made plasters of their face and had painted them up and put these furs and feathers on there. And so these 3 Indian masks were on the wall opposite from the bear, and the 3 of them were looking at the bear, and they were right in order: the Indian headdress, the wolf pelt, and the bison fur with the horns. So they were in order, just as I said. And they said they went into the basement, and it was filled with a whole bunch of dead animals. This guy was an amateur taxidermist who was learning how to do it, and he was going out and killing animals just for the purpose of practicing. And so there's my hunter yelling at me about what he shouldn't have done. And then they did have a human body, dead body in their house, and that they knew about, and it was not cremated. It was a mummy that they had purchased from a museum that had gone out of business. So everything that I said to that point was absolutely accurate. And then the tree spirits that I saw in the house that were raging mad about whatever, and I couldn't identify what they were right away, and I had to keep asking, "What is that?" until I saw they were tree spirits from a tree that were raging mad and in the house, and I had never seen anything like it before. When the people who lived there said that they'd never had a paranormal issue, nothing had ever happened until that tree fell down in the front yard, and then all hell broke loose in their house. So that was the tree spirits angry in the house.
So when you kind of enter this state to find the location, are you by yourself and you kind of feel your way, and then at that point, you contact Jenna and you guys head on out? I mean, what's really that process like?
For the particular case where we found that den-like structure, I had received a report from a couple of Native elders who live within 3 miles of there about a structure that their grandchildren had found, and the grandparents were really freaked out about it. And we originally were going there to look at that structure that the grandkids had found. Unfortunately, there was a powwow going on that weekend, and they weren't able to come with us to show us exactly where it was. And the directions that they gave, we were unable to follow them. We just really couldn't find it on those back trails. They wanted us to. They gave us walking directions to it, but it was 95 degrees that day and smoldering hot. one of our teammates was feeling very ill, and we just didn't feel like we could walk miles into the woods that day safely with her not feeling well. So we tried to drive it, and we just couldn't find it. So I had known what area we were going to 2 weeks before that. And so I had started to remote view the woods all around that area and just scanning it, asking if there was Bigfoot there and or any Bigfoot evidence that we could collect. And I had seen a huge male Bigfoot face, and it was humongous, and it was identifying a whole big area that was actually on the other side of the trail from where that den-like structure was that we found, which lit up to me as Bigfoot evidence we could collect. And I didn't ask any further questions about what it was because I was so focused on the aggressive male face that I was seeing on the other side of the trail. I did originally start to walk towards the aggressive male face because that was to the right. And I took a few steps in, and the rock came down right in front of me on the ground, bouncing. And I stopped. And it was daylight still, so I'm just now looking up going, okay, where did the rock, can I see what's through the rocks? You know, because before when I've had rocks thrown at me, it never at me. It was always in front of me, you know, kind of just little rocks, obviously telling me not to go that way. It was always dark. You know, I could hear them coming down through the branches of the trees, but this time it was light. So I'm like, eyes up looking, is there anything up there that I can see? And then one of our teammates, Nikki, had been looking left because I had told the girl to the right is the aggressive male, to the left is the Bigfoot evidence we could collect. I'm not sure what that is. Nikki had been looking left, and I was looking right. And she screamed out, oh, look at that. And at that point, I was like, duh, don't go towards the aggressive male. Go check out the Bigfoot evidence we can collect. That's the smart thing. So I went around to the other side of the car and started looking to the left instead. And that's when we took off into the woods to find the structure.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. I think many of us probably, you know, just have really tough time getting our minds around that. It'd be really cool if I could do it, but appreciate you kind of just, you know, sharing that experience.
What a lot of like meditational people who do meditations and are trying to see visions, they will focus on something. Gypsies used to use crystal balls, and it's not that they were magical crystal balls. It was something they could focus on that would actually, the way that is described that a crystal ball works is that it helps you to see what you know inside. It's just a projection. If two psychics were to look at the same crystal ball at the same time, they would not see the same vision. So it's really what they're seeing inside, and then they're just focusing their vision to see it outside of themselves. It's not necessarily really playing a movie there inside the ball. I've used the same thing on just glass lights in my office, just looking at glass lights and dim light. I'll start seeing visions inside the glass light, and it's not even a crystal ball. And I have done this so much that it is very easy for me to go into that state. Sometimes too easy, like when I don't intend it to happen. But that's cool too. Just not when I'm driving. That's a good thing not to happen when I'm driving.
Okay, so I have to ask. So Jen tells you she's going to remote view and you guys are going to go out on the trail. But what was your initial reaction to that? Did you have confidence? What was kind of going through your mind?
Honestly, I was a believer in Jen. I'll be honest. I believed in Jen. I wasn't so sure about remote viewing. And it wasn't until we actually got to that point that she was talking about when we found that stick structure that we literally, she was remote viewing and she said, okay, let's stop the car here. And we got out of the car and all of a sudden it was like she led us right out where we needed to be. And it was as if she already knew. And I think she did because it's remote viewing. She knew exactly where she was going. So honestly, that was the first time that I realized that remote viewing does work. So even though I believed in Jen, I didn't believe in remote viewing so much. But after this experience, I am very much a believer and I am excited to learn.
So just curious and question for either of you, but how often do you guys get out there in Minnesota? And, you know, certainly you've got a lot of seasons, but maybe just kind of describe kind of how much time you can put into research there in Minnesota.
It's been interesting to get out because we live in Minnesota, North Dakota, and it's really cold up here in the wintertime. We don't do any looking really in the wintertime unless we go somewhere else where it's warmer, which happens. I actually was out in Ohio and in Virginia in March, so, I got some time in there, but and definitely not in Minnesota over the winter. A lot of the places that I really, really want to get to, you can't even get to because they don't plow any of that. So you just can't get there. Maybe you could if you snowshoed in, but I'm not that committed to it, I guess. I'm not too much of a big baby when it comes to the cold. But we get out in the summertime, in the spring and in the fall. Spring and fall are my favorite. Spring and fall are my very favorite. And it's not so hot. So actually we've been doing a lot of prep work because our expedition is very soon, and where we're going to be going out. We're not necessarily putting a time limit on this time. So we've got, about 4 or 5 days planned, but we've cleared our schedules to stay longer if we find something really fantastic. So unfortunately, our whole team can't make it for the whole time. So for some of the time, we'll be together, the majority of us. And then for the rest of the time, it'll just be Jenna and I. And to be honest, a lot of the time it's Jenna and I because our schedules are so similar and we live the closest together that we can just run off to somewhere really quick on the spur of a moment and get in a little time in the woods. So, sometimes it's more frequent than others. Definitely not very much over the winter.
So let's just talk about the wildlife. And as you're out there doing research, I know you said, you try to be as vulnerable as possible. But do you guys carry bear spray? What kind of self-defense equipment do you carry? We
have not carried bear spray or anything of the sort. And I've been kind of a stickler about that whenever anybody has really wanted that. I did recently for this next expedition. I did buy a small air horn. And that's going to be about it. And primarily because I'm taking us into an area that I know is filled with bears. And we were in an area where there was bears before, but we're going to go really close. So this time we're going to take these air horns with us. I'm not too concerned about it just because I've been up with those bears before and they've never given us a problem. So this is the first time I'm taking the team up there to ride the bears. So
when you guys go out, are you on private land, public land, BLM? Are you in national parks? I mean, what type of geography and terrain are you guys researching in?
Although we do go into national and state parks, that is not our primary place of looking. We typically end up on Indian reservations. And one of them in particular is a closed reservation in northern Minnesota. My mom is a tribal member of that reservation. And I particularly like looking there because it is so not very populated. There's not a lot of people. Also, the way that they hunt up there is completely different than they hunt anywhere else. There is no hunting season. It's always hunting season. So Jenna and I show up in very loud, bright clothing. We never try to sneak up on anything. We want to make sure that we'll be able to be seen by the hunters because they drive by and shoot from their vehicle. So we always want to make sure that we're very loudly seen as not deer. So, and that's the other thing. Like when we find these den-like structures in the woods, we know they're not made by hunters because hunters would never do that up there. They would never. That would be at risk of getting shot if you were to try to hide in the woods like that. That nobody would ever do that. My great-grandparents got shot in the woods up there because somebody saw them and thought they were a moose. And really, they were camping underneath. Back in the old days, they would turn over a boat, and that would be your tent. So they were sleeping under their boat, and as they started to move their boat, somebody saw this moving, and they got shot. So, because they thought it was a moose. It's very quick. They don't expect people to be out there in the woods like that. It's just not expected. So, in these areas, it's highly unpopulated. And, you know, we go out there with a tribal member. We have permission to be there. And that's important. You can't be there without permission. And that's important. You cannot be there without permission. You would get chased out of there big time. And I'm fairly well known up there now. People know who I am just by looking at me, so they don't bother me too much anymore. So, and that's because my family is from up there. So, you know, they come to identify me by sight now. So that's a good thing. You know, we've looked on several other Indian reservation areas, and it just seems like we have the best luck there. In our state parks, a lot of times they close at 10 p.m. In the areas where we want to be looking at, and we're not allowed to be there. It's after 10, so, you know, this just works so much better for us. And we've had so much more luck. I feel like they're just, the population of them is thicker up there, is what I'm seeing. We've had extremely good luck finding things.
So if you wouldn't mind just talking about the wildlife you've experienced up there researching, do you run into moose or deer or bears? What kind of things do you run into there on the reservation?
I have never seen a moose on the reservation, and I've only ever seen a couple of deer up there. The deer are very sparse because it is always hunting season there. I've only ever seen maybe 3 deer on the reservation up there, ever, in my entire life, 3. The most dangerous thing in the woods up there, I would say, are the wild dogs. They were somebody's pet at one time, and then they were just left to fend for themselves, and the dogs pack up, like wolf pack. And because they're not afraid of people, like wolves will stay away from people. They're not going to bug you, usually, unless you're, you know, hurt and in the woods. You know, then you're easy meal. But for the most part, wolves won't bother you. But dog packs, they will if they're hungry. So that's probably the most dangerous thing that's up there. There are black bears, and the area that we're going to go to this time has got a lot more black bears. We're going to stay closer to the vehicle, though, and do some night ops out there with some night vision stuff, because I've remote viewed the area and I'm seeing Bigfoot right there too. So we're gonna do some night ops and stay very close to the car, because I know it is thick with bears. And we're going to be near their food source. So we're going to be scoping out that area.
So I'm sure that there's a few people out there listening to the show that probably have some concerns about going out unarmed in the wilderness. But Jenna, maybe, you know, talk about kind of that experience for you. I know Jen said you're very brave, but what is it that gives you the courage to go out there and be vulnerable without protection?
In all honesty, in 2009, I had a near-death experience, and I was in a coma. After I came out of the coma and after everything I experienced, I lost a lot of the fear that I had. I really have faith that I am here for a purpose, and no matter what, whichever way, whichever path I take is going to be the right one. So I can't walk into any situation with fear. You know, if you walk into a situation with fear, no matter if you're around people or animals, they'll be able to tell. So I have to keep my head up and not be scared. And yeah, you do get scared. I'm not going to say I don't get scared, but I can't let fear rule what I'm doing next or what I'm feeling.
Can you share a little bit about just the forest and the type of habitat and vegetation you're in, and really how dense that is and how it varies there in Minnesota?
I think it depends on what kind of forest we're in. If we're in a pine forest, obviously we're not going to see very far. Or an evergreen forest, we're not going to see very far. But up there, it's a lot of different mix of birch and ash, quaking ash and elm, and not a lot of oaks. But in maples, there's maples, a lot of maples. When the foliage grows in, it's harder to see long distances. When we found that stick structure, it was, in August. I think that was August. Yeah, it was the beginning of August. And so all the foliage was on the trees. We could maybe see pretty clearly maybe 25 feet in pretty clearly without anything being really obstructed. But then the foliage was sometimes 4 feet high that was growing up, the grasses, and the other thing that we have to be watchful for is this new invasive species called wild parsnip, which will burn you. It causes burns on your skin that will leave scars. So we have to go in with fully clothed from head to toe. And Jenna even wears gloves because of that, just so we're not brushing up against something like that. Because we were walking through wild parsnip that was about 4.5 feet tall last August. When I've been into a pine forest like red pine, a lot of the time the foliage for those trees is higher up in the canopy, but the stuff that's growing down below that isn't necessarily red pine is a whole bunch of like little quaking ash or poplar trees, things that are, I call them clone trees because they spread by the root and they send up clones of themselves up, and they just come in really, really thick. So those are really, really hard to navigate through, and because they just come up so thick and they grow so fast. They can grow 6 feet in one season. So sometimes it's harder to see. It just depends on where we're at. And when we are thinking about mosquitoes and things like that, that's part of the thing that I'm looking for. I'm looking at areas that I think the mosquitoes aren't going to be very thick at this time of the year, because we've gone to areas where we've had activity before, and our car is swarmed with mosquitoes before we even get out. And some of our teammates just really had a problem with that. Jenna and I were ready to go. We had our bug spray on and we were going. But not everybody as outdoorsy as we sometimes are. So, both of us grew up on farms in Minnesota, and being out in the woods is not a big deal for us.
For our listeners, can you explain, too, a little bit about, how folks follow you and maybe your website, social outlets, and any shows you have?
We have our website at She-Squatchers.com. And we're also on Facebook at facebook.com/She-Squatchers Official. She-Squatchers Official is also how they can find our YouTube channel. And if you don't remember any of that, just go to She-Squatchers.com, and there are links at the bottom of the page to all of those things and our Twitter. So Facebook is where we share a lot more of our up-to-date things, so I encourage people to go like our page there and check that out. Our event schedule page on our website is very filled right now. We're actually coming to Washington. We're going to speak at the Sasquatch Summit in November of 2019. We'll be there. Maybe we'll get to meet you guys in person. And also, we do a weekly radio show called The Journey Radio Show, and you can find that at thejourneyradioshow.com or on Facebook at facebook.com/The Journey on Radio. And all of the shows are archived on the website. And we often are talking about Bigfoot or cryptids. And sometimes we'll talk about paranormal things, but most of the time it's Bigfoot and cryptids. But my past listeners from my old show occasionally request me to do something about psychic phenomenon or ghost haunting. So occasionally there'll be a show like that in there. But for the most part, it's Bigfoot and the She-Squatchers. So that's a recording of our journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. So definitely check it out. Again, thank you both for coming on the show. Hopefully you get to enjoy the website, and appreciate you joining the syndicate and helping promote our cause.
Wonderful. I love your site. Definitely. I need so much more time to really get in there and find out exactly what everything is about. And by the way, I absolutely love listening to all of your podcasts. They're fabulous. In fact, my favorite one, oh my goodness, is amazing. Townsend.
Oh, yeah. Mitchell Townsend, he did our holiday special.
Yes, he had such a wonderful interview. Wow, you guys rocked it.
Thanks again for the feedback. Really do appreciate that. And again, can't thank you guys enough for coming on Sasquatch Syndicate, and really do appreciate it. I know our listeners do as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
This concludes our July 2018 podcast. Sasquatch Syndicate will return on Wednesday, August 1st. Thanks to all our listeners and those who have been out to our website and those who have joined us on social media. Sasquatch is a controversial subject, so for all the believers and disbelievers and those that will tell you they have all the answers, just remember, We're flying through space at 700 miles per hour. Buckle up.